Hello everyone, my name is Guilherme and Uniday Engine is a 3D game engine that I'm developing featuring a complete and usability-oriented editor, physically based rendering, different shading, ray marshing, global illumination, bullet physics, 3D asset important, Python scripting, entity component based and much more. Right now, the project is in the road to the first public release and this video is a tour covering the basics of the engine. So I hope you enjoy it, and if you're not subscribed to the channel and want to follow this project and hopefully use it very soon, please subscribe and leave your comments below. So right now I do have here a small scene set up so you can see some features such as global illumination, physically based rendering, skeleton animation, and wind shaders, and a lot of cool stuff. But in this video, we're gonna create a new project from scratch and explore every feature that we have. So let's go ahead and close this project and create a new one. When you open Uniday Engine Editor, you can see two windows. You have a console window here in the background that is useful for debugging, and you also have the project manager window that you can select from the custom projects that you already have in your folder, or you can create a new one. So let's do a new project here. YouTube project 1. I click create project. And here we go. We have a new project already created and set up for us, and we can start playing around. Of course, there's nothing here in the editor because we haven't created anything yet. So let's go ahead and start by creating a new scene. I will click here in this new scene button. And just like that, we can already see something going on here in the scene. There's a cube and a plane. It's a little bit dark, so we're gonna change this real quick. But first, if you hold the right mouse button, you can navigate around with your camera using WASD and the mouse movement just like you would do in a first-person game. You can also use Q or A or Shift and space to go up or down while you are holding the right mouse button. Very simple. So let's make it a little bit brighter here so we can see what's going on. I will first go ahead here in the scene tab that we can access all the scene configuration. I will disable the depth of field for now. So click here to disable it. And I will start by changing the sky color to something a little bit more happy. So in the sky color, I can click here and change the color that I want. Or if I prefer, I can literally type an hexadecimal color here, just like that. And I will also change the ambient color to something a little bit more pleasant, just like that. I think that's enough. And something that I also want to change here is the sun position and color. If I expand the sun tab here in the scene editor, I can have a bunch of options. The first option is the color, and make it a little bit more reddish, something like that. And I will also change the time and the angle of the sun. The time is 0 to 24 hours, and if I rotate it, if I drag the slider, I can see the shadows, so we can figure out where the sun is. And the angle is the rotation of the sun, just like that. Very quick, we have a little bit of a better scene. I can adjust a bunch more settings, like the bloom here, that is a little bit crazy right now, but I will keep it because as soon as we start configuring the material, we're gonna have a little bit of a better results. So let's play around a little bit with this scene right now. I can left click to select an object, for example this cube here, and of course using the sliders, using the gizmos, I can manipulate my object just like that. If I press W, A or R, I can alternate between the gizmo type, move, rotate or scale. I can also do this by the top icons here, and of course I can rotate and scale my objects as I want. Another cool thing here is that I can use Shift D, and yes, this is a Blender shortcut to duplicate the object. So I just press Shift D, and right now I do have 2 cubes instead of 1. Let me change the orientation here to world, so I can move the cube a little bit better. Here we go. Of course, if I don't like something that I did, if I don't like this object, for example, I can select it and press delete to just delete the object. Let me scale it up, this plane a little bit because it's the ground. And let's add a light here, a lamp, just for us to understand a little bit better what's going on. So I will press Shift A, and yes, this is another Blender shortcut, and I can create a new entity here. So let me create a new light. Here you go. And you can see that a lot of things is going on here because this is a light. You can drag and drop it, and you can immediately see the reflection here in the ground. Of course, we can adjust these variables as we do, and we're gonna do this in a few moments. But just to explain to you a little bit better some features, let me add a new mesh here, another cube. And this engine do have a parent system. For example, I have two meshes here, and I can also select it in the Scene Graph tab. So I have my plane, and I have this mesh that we just added. If I move my plane, it will move individually. But let's say that I want this mesh here to be a child of this plane. I can simply select my mesh, drag and drop it to the plane in the hierarchy here in the Scene Graph. And right now, the mesh is inside the plane, and if I select, drag and drop the plane itself, the mesh will be dragged as well. Of course, the movement is not local yet, so I'm gonna have to adjust it. Here we go. Here's my mesh because my plane is scaled up, and if I rotate it, if I move it, everything will affect its child. That is this cube right here. And of course I can do the same thing with the child, and everything will work just fine. Alright, so let me delete this child object. I will also select my plane and go here in the Inspector tab that I can see all the components of my entity, and I will select my transform component and reset the position, the rotation, and maybe the scale here to make it a little bit more solid. Alright, now that we know that we can do this kind of stuff, let me select my my lamp and have some fun. So I'll select my light. Where's my light? Right here. This is my light. And let's add a material, a mesh to this light. So right now, the light have a transform component and a light component. Let me click here to create a new component, and I will create a mesh component. Just like that, we can select a mesh and a material here. I will go ahead here in the asset browser and select the mesh tab, and I can see a bunch of default meshes. Of course, I can import some custom one, and we're gonna do this in this video. But for now, let me select this cube and drag and drop it to the mesh icon here. And I also need to add a material because right now I can't see anything here. So let me go ahead in the material here. I will expand this, and I will add a new material, lamp matte. I will click here in create, and you can immediately see that we have a cube here that is working, but we need to make this material emissive because this is acting like a regular material and a regular cube, and that's not what we want. Let me actually also reduce the scale of this cube a little bit. Okay, so I will drag and drop this lamp matte material here to the material editor, so we can edit everything inside it. And of course I can edit the color of my cube and so on. And something that is cool is that I can also edit the emissive color, the emission color here. So if I make it bright, you can see that the cube will start to glow. And something interesting and that is that this game engine do have global illumination. In other words, this cube, of course, is emitting a lot of light because there is a lamp, there's a light component here. But if I add an emissive material to an object that do not have a lamp component on it, it will also emit some colors. We're gonna see that in a few moments. But first, let me just adjust this this material here. That is a default material applied to both the cube and the plane here in this scene. So I have my default material. Let me drag and drop it to the material editor. And for example, let me change the metallic a little bit. Maybe the roughness. And here we go. I can adjust a bunch of stuff here by adjusting these variables here. Now it's a little bit more pleasant. Let me select this cube actually. I was talking about emissive materials, so let me make this cube actually glow. And I will also change its mesh to a cylinder that we have here. So let me drag and drop the cylinder, and you can already see that this cube changed its shape. It's not a cube anymore. Let me change the name of this object to emissive, and I will create a new material here. In the material tab, I will expand this and add new emissive. Create, here we go, and I can drag and drop this material to the edit material tab. I will make it red, and let's make this cube glow. So in the emission, I will actually make it red. And if you see here in the ground actually gets a little bit red on it. And that's because of global illumination. This cube is emitting a red color. And even if I had no sunlight or no point light or anything like that, for example, let me go ahead here in the sun and make the intensity goes to 0, and the ambient color, let me make it dark, let me make it black. You can see here that I do have my lamp data here, the light component here. I can increase the intensity, you can increase the color of my lamp and stuff like that. But I also have my cylinder, my cube that is not a cube, that is emitting light. There's nothing else in the scene except for this the cylinder, and you can see that it do have light casted. If I make the emission 0, it will not. So this is global illumination in action. Let me go ahead and go back here to my default parameters. I'll make this intensity a little bit more brighter. And here we go. The next thing that is interesting to do in this engine is to import materials, is to import textures, import meshes, and so on. So let's do that right now, and let's start with this ground, because this plane, well, it's a little bit boring right now. I'll create a new material for it. Let me add a new material, ground. Click and create, and I'll drag and drop this ground material to the material editor. Here you go. And right now, instead of solid colors, let's add a little bit of textures. But of course, I have no textures here in the texture tab. Oh, actually, before that, let me press Ctrl S to save my scene and everything. So I'll press Ctrl S, and it will gonna be saved. Right, and now let me import a bunch of textures right now. I do have here a folder full of textures from textureheaven.com, and let's say that I wanna put a ground textures on it. Then I need to select it here in the list. This one, this is a cool and simple ground textures, enough for us to start. I will select the texture, but I will also select the normal map and maybe the bump map. I don't know, something that we can use as a metallic or a specular stuff, just like that. I'll select those textures, and I can simply drag and drop to inside the project, and it will automatically import every asset. So I did that, and right now I have here those 3 textures, and I can apply to the albedo, the normal, and so on. So let me drag and drop this this texture here to the albedo, just like that. My ground already have a little bit more identity to it. Let me drag and drop the normal map to the normal here, and you can see that something is going on. I can adjust the normal influence here. And let me adjust the metallic and the roughness of this map, of course. I can have a lot of fun with it, just like that. But let's try to make it a little bit more realistic. I think that's enough. So simply like that, we can have a bunch of cool stuff inside your project, our project. Let me make the sun a little bit more intense here, so we can see a little bit better the details and what is going on. So I do have here a cool ground. Now I have too much specular on it. I'll make it a little bit more hog. Here we go. That's a cool ground. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Just a little bit. Here we go. And let's import some custom meshes because, well, that's a cool thing to add. So I will open my old project here that I already have a bunch of meshes. I have a .blend file, .daa, and a bunch of other formats. And I will drag and drop just like that. It's simple like that. I will drag and drop my game assets to here, and it will import everything. So first of all, let me open here the mesh folder, the mesh tab here. I do have only 3 meshes, but let's create a new one by drag and dropping this game assets.blend. That is a blend file full of cool stuff. Actually, let me open here this game assets in Blender so we can see a little bit better what is going on here. I'm using a PGE, by the way, but it's a fork of Blender, so it will work just fine with Blender itself as well. So let me import, and here you can see a bunch of cool assets that I do have inside Blender, including a tree, a rock, some stuff here, some cool stuff, and a castle. Anyways, let me close it. And let me drag and drop the game assets.blend to inside my engine. And let's wait. Here we go. I do have here in my asset browser tab a bunch of new meshes that I just imported. So let me press Shift A here in the viewport to add a new mesh. Shift A, let me add a mesh. Here you go, I have a default cube. Simple like that. Of course, I forgot to say that, but if you press G, the selected object will automatically snaps to where you are pointing the mouse on. That is very handy for, creating a level and stuff like that. Let me select this cube, and let me start with the tower mesh. So drag and drop the tower to the mesh, just like that. We have this tower object. I need to rotate it on the x-axis. Let me actually make this using the transform component, so I can manually type negative 90 degrees, and it will work just fine. Here we go, I have my cool tower here, and we need to create a new material. And this is something cool about the importer, is that if you have a mesh, actually if you have textures inside your .blend file, it will automatically import those textures as well. So you can see here that in my texture tab we do have a lot more textures than we had before. So let me create a new material for this mesh. Right now, the editor imports the material as well, so you can see a list, but it's not working as expected right now, so I'll just create a new tower material. Let me create a new one here. I'll drag and drop this material to the edit material, just like that. And let me go to the texture tab again and drag and drop this tower texture to the albedo color. Just like that, we have our tower. Of course, I can adjust every setting. Let me make this lamp goes here so we can see what's going on. And let me change all the values, the roughness, the specular of the stuff, to make it work a little bit better. And just like that, we have our tower material. Let's also add something, another thing that is cool in this engine is the grass, the vegetation assets. So let me add a new mesh here, simple one, and let me go to the meshes and select maybe a simple bush here to do the trick. Let me select this one, nature bush tree, and let me create a new material for it. Very simple one. So brush, actually it's bush mat 1, create, drag and drop to the edit material, and I will also add the correct albedo to it. So if you see, it automatically detects the alpha and discard those pixels. So now we have an alpha bush. I think it's rotated 90 degrees, just like the tower was. So let me change it, because I imported these assets from Blender. That's why it appears rotated here. And here we go, I do have my bush, but let's play around with this bush a little bit, because, well, it's a very boring bush. We need to make it a little bit more excited. That's why inside the material tab, we do have the wind option. And this is very interesting, because if I activate the wind, you can see that this object starts moving like crazy. Let me reduce the influence a little bit to a very small thing. I can adjust the speed. Then I can adjust the scale of this. I can hold Ctrl and left mouse click here in a UI element to edit by hand. Let me make it 10. Scale of this. Oops, that's too much. 3 maybe, or I don't know. I think I'll just leave in 1, because everything more than that looks like an underwater material. But you can see that simply like that, I do have my grass moving. So I can shift D to make a copy, can rotate this, and I can create my environment using those assets. It's very simple, very straightforward, and of course, yes, I can apply this to everything, including add emissive colors to this bush. As you can see here, it's emitting green light, and the ground is a little bit greenish near this object. It's amazing. I'll make the emission. Let me go back to 0. And I can do this with every kind of mesh that I want. For example, let me add a new mesh, and I'll go to the mesh and add the rock. I'm gonna create a new material to it as well. So I have a rock mat. I go drag and drop this to the editor, just like that, and I'll go to the textures and drag and drop. By the way, you can select here and manually search. You can type the texture that if you want and everything else, but it's just more convenient to have this in a visual way. So I do have here my texture. Let me rotate it counter 90 degrees. Let me change the scaling a little bit. I think that's fine. Oops. Need to adjust maybe the metallic and the roughness of my texture a little bit. Here you go. And of course, just for fun, let me apply this wine material to this rock. So let me click use. Oh my god. Gonna change the speed, the influence, make it a little bit smaller, and you can see that I do have a little bit more complex mesh going on here, and still I can have white shader on it. No problem. It's very trivial, and it's not very heavy. It's very lightweight, this thing. I'll create a copy here to try to composite something a little bit cooler. Let me select this mesh. It's a little bit dark in here. Change the time of the day. Rotate it a little bit. Okay, that's enough. That's a little bit better. Rotate a little bit more. Here we go. And let me duplicate this with Shift D and press G to snap to here. Here we go. So I do have a little bit of a fun here creating this mesh. And to end this video in a good way, I will also add skeletal animation here. So I will Shift A and add a mesh again, and let me import an object here, because right now I don't have an object. So let me select an enemy that is a badass enemy that I just have, and I have a DAA format. Let me drag and drop the enemy. I will also do the same for the texture of the enemy, because this format do not have embedded textures, so I'm importing it right now. So let me change the mesh to the enemy mesh, that is this one right here in the bottom. So let me change it. Oops, I have the wrong object selected. Here we go. That's my enemy. Very basic, does not have any animation on it, but we're gonna fix that. Let me add a new material. Let me edit this material, and let me add the albedo color to it. Here we go. And rotate this enemy as well. Gonna have to adjust the metallic and the roughness maybe. Here we go. And to end this, I need to select an armature and an animation to it. So if I go to my armature tab, I do have the armature that belongs to this enemy. Let me drag and drop it here. And if I go to the animation tab, I also have the animation that came to the DAA file. So if I go ahead, drag and drop to the animation, you can see that the enemy automatically starts running the animation. It's rotated. Let me make it 90 degrees. Here we go. Now it's just fine. And I can see that I have my animation going on. And I can also import multiple animations to an object. Let me import the enemy one run. Here we go. Imported. And in an animation here, I have the enemy one run. Can drag and drop to the animation tab. And here we go. I can have my enemy running, my enemy idling, and I can alternate that when I create a game. Okay, so this is the basics about Unity Engine. There's a lot more here, and something that I forgot to show you. Let me add a new transform here. That is basically an empty stuff. Let me change this to local. Here we go, and let me add a camera component on this object. So new camera component, and let me activate the use camera component here, so I can see what is going on with my camera. Oops, here we go. And if I press the key P or F5, the game will start from my camera. So here we go. I have a standalone runtime that I can drag and drop. Here, position my camera. I do have here a standalone console as well that I can see the debug information about it. And this is where the game will run. So if I add some logic to it, and by the way, I can do it by creating Python file. I can program this engine in Python. It will work in the game itself. Actually, let me add a rich body component here. Oh, another thing that I forgot to show is that I can use empties like the transforms or an empty object as a way to organize the project. So let me add this empty here. I will delete the transform component, and it will become a folder, and I can select this kind of assets here and drag and drop it to inside my folder. That way I can organize my scene graph just fine. Okay, so let me select my plane, that is the ground, right now. And let me add a rigid body component to it. So new component, rigid body component. It requires a mesh and a mass. So let me drag and drop this mesh component mesh to the rigid body component. Let me keep the mass in 0. If the mass is 0, it will act as a static object. And let me select the emissive object, this one. Make it go up, and I'll add the rigid body component to it as well. Rigid body component, here we go. I'll drag and drop the default cylinder to the material, and in the mass I will make it more than 0, so it will be dynamic. So if I save that and if I press B to play, I will be able to see my object falling here and colliding with the ground, just like you can expect in a physics. I can duplicate this object as well. Shift D, create a copy of it, just like that. Shift D again. Create another copy and rotate. I will save, press B to play the game. Here we go. And you can see the objects colliding. Of course, it's not colliding, it will not gonna collide with this or this because there's no physics on it, as you can see here, but it's colliding and the physics is working just fine. And just to end this presentation, let me save this. Let me actually close this project and let me open it again, but this time I will open the project that I was using before when this video started. That is this one. It's a little bit more complex with a lot more features. You can see here that I'm using the wind shader to move these objects, and I do have a decal shader that is great, and I forgot to show you. So this is a decal, and it will snap to the surface just fine, including emissive surface, just like that, and animated surface, just like that. That's good. But what I wanted to show here is in the gameplay, if I select my player, you can see here that I have a player. Inside my player, I have my player mesh, and I have my camera that is right on top here. If I click use camera, you can see that it's a top-down game. Fine. And my player do have a Python component with a player component script. If I go to the script tab and open my player component, I can see the script in the text editor. That way I can create Python scripts just fine right here, okay? And it's an amazing feature to have. And if I press P to start the game, you'll be able to see that I can control my player, and there's an animation. Here we go, a lot of stuff going on here. The enemy is kind of working, and if I collide with the enemy, just a test collision, it will be deleted, just like that. Okay, so everything is working just fine here. And the last thing that I'd like to show you in this presentation is that if I go ahead in the asset browser and click more, I can open in File Explorer to review my assets. That is everything that I do have in this project. And by the way, it will, when you drag and drop an asset to the engine, it will copy and paste the file here, so we can keep everything in an organized manner. Okay, so basically this is a bunch of stuff, but there's not everything. I haven't touched about the tag stuff that I can use to categorize. Oops, I accidentally pressed P. I have to fix that because it started the game. But I can use the tags to create or delete tags to an entity, and of course I forgot to show you, but we do have user interface possibilities. So I can select a canvas, a UI canvas here, and I can create UI elements and a bunch of cool stuff here. Let me actually go ahead. I'm not gonna explain in details here. Let me create new UI, and here's a UI element on top. I can reduce the alpha, I can even blur the background, make it dark. I can do basically everything that I want. Okay, so it's work in progress, this part here, but it's amazing to have as a user interface for the game. And that's basically everything that I have right now in Uniday Engine. I'm working on it to make it a little bit more usable, easy to use, because that's my main goal with this project. I'd like to make it very, very easy and straightforward, so everyone can open it and start using and programming, creating his own games. So that's everything. I hope you enjoyed. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, I'd like to I will show more updates of this engine here in this channel, so please subscribe. And if you want, you can join the Discord server of the channel. I will leave the link in the description, as in the comments. And if you have any suggestion, any questions, just leave in the comments and I will try to answer as soon as possible. So I hope you enjoy it and I see you in the next video.